Today we're going to make the wall sign. The wall sign cabinet is on the left-hand side of the room. Find the cupboard and remove the tote that has a set of directions and the pre-cut stencils in it. Take the tote to your table where you'll have your lumber, a pencil, and a marker waiting. The easiest way to find the stencils you're looking for is just to tip the tote over on your workstation and spread them out so that you can find what you're looking for. Oh, here's a stack of letters that I need. Today I'm going to be routering a wall sign that says Steve. Make sure the stencil you're using are not bigger than the board that you have in front of you. Lay out the stencils. Now you want to line them up edge to edge so that the spacing is correct between the letters. Hold each stencil still while you take a pencil and trace around the inside edge of the stencil. Once you've finished and it's laid out the way you'd like, you need to go over the lines now with a darker marker so that you can easily see what you need to router when you're sitting at the router table. Now you can run the lines right across the top of the letter S. And just follow the edge. Once you've completed all of the tracing, if you want, you don't have to use stencils. You could freehand letter your wall sign as well. Just make sure you leave a 1/2 inch of material above and below the lettering on the board. This way you won't cut through the edge. Let's go look at the routering table. At the routering table you're going to find some clamps. You'll put your project there, but underneath you're going to find some practice wood. It's a good idea to give us a little time to practice with the router since it's a new machine. So set a piece of scrap lumber on top of the cabinet. We're going to use 2 clamps to hold the wood in place. We don't want the wood moving around as you're routering. Just squeeze the handle and it'll pump shut nice and tight. You're going to use 2 clamps, 1 on either end. With your marker, first we have to turn on the exhaust system. This will collect all the dust that's produced when we're routering. With your marker, trace a couple of letters that you'll be using on your project. When we run the router, we need to wear hearing protection as it is very loud. A pair of safety glasses are also required. The large router is the one we'll use for the main lettering. In the bottom of the router is a router bit. It doesn't extend far from the base, just enough to cut into the wood. You never want to have contact with the spinning router bit. There's a trigger switch on the right hand side of the router. Squeeze the trigger and set the router down on top of the line you wish to cut. Cut slowly. Take your time. Don't be in a rush. As you're routering, remember to push down firmly on the handles. You need to hold the router down onto the wood that you're routering. When you get to the end of a letter, tip it up, release the trigger. After you've practiced and feel comfortable using the router, it's time to move on to our project. This time we're going to clamp both of the clamps on one end of the board so that we can router as the letter STE, and then we'll move the clamps on the other end to do the other side of the board. When you're routering bubble letters, remember to stay inside the lines that you've drawn. You don't want to router on the line with bubble letters or the word gets really big and it's hard. One letter will kind of gobble up the one next to it. So try to stay inside the lines that you've drawn. You can go down and back up. Once you've cleaned up the edges of the letters, always make sure you put the router back in the router base. Never set the router on the metal grate. It'll ruin the router bit. We now move the clamps to the other side of the board so we have access to the letters V and E. Go ahead and finish up routering, remove the clamps, and we're going to then sand the surface of the board to remove all the marker. At the workstation you'll find a sander. The on-off switch is on the front. Turn the sander on before you set it on the wood to prevent heavy scratching. Hold the board in place with your hand and sand back and forth until the marker disappears. This will smooth the surface and remove any little bits of wood that might have been raised as we routed it. When the entire board is smooth and free of marker, we're ready to move on. To get rid of the dust, just tip the board over and tap it. Now if you decided to do single lettering, not the bubble lettering, the process is just to put your router bit at the beginning of the letter you want to router, set it down, hold it firm, and just follow the letter as you go. You might find this method easier than trying to fill in bubble letters with the router bit. We have a second router at the workstation. It's just a little detail router. It has a very small V bit, and it'll come down just about 1/8 of an inch, and it's used for detail work. There's the on-off switch. Turn it on and just hang on to it with 2 hands, and you can do some little scroll work or some fancy work with this router bit, adding just a little bit of detail. Kind of goofy, but you can just practice a little bit, have fun. If you want to practice on the scrap wood, that'd be a good idea too. I'm just going to add a little smiley face here. You can router both sides of the wall sign if you wish, but you'll only probably be seeing one of them. So remember, you can always turn it over if it doesn't turn out well. Let's move on to painting. Back at your workstation, you want to set out a large piece of cardboard. We have lab coats available for you if you'd like to cover up so you don't get paint on your clothing. We'll have jars of different colored paints. You'll use the paints there and place into one of these little cups. Just a small amount will do. You don't need. You can always add more later. Always put the cap back on the paints in case it gets tipped over. Find a brush that's the proper width. There are several brushes available, different types and sizes. Load up your brush, and all I'm going to do is just kind of fill in the grooves that I cut. You can paint the inside of the letters, you can paint the surface of the board. Have fun, be creative. There, I finished painting. Not a very good job, but anyhow, I got it done. I can always come back and sand it off when I'm done. We want to put the excess paint back in the jar so we can conserve our resources. So try to get as much paint back out of that dish as you can. Okay, and the dish and the brush need to go to the sink to be washed. The best way to get that brush washed is to take the brush, put it right in the palm of your hand, and just swirl it about. This will remove all the paint from the brush. A well-cleaned brush should not give away what color was used last. We also want to kind of clean out that dish a bit. After we let our sign dry for a day, it's ready to have the clear coat applied. We'll apply this spray finish in the finishing room. Take your dried wall sign into the finishing room and set it on the rotating base. We'll want to wear safety goggles while using a spray finish to prevent finish from getting in our eyes. To turn on the spray gun, we first need to add air pressure. So we turn this handle into the upward position, which applies air pressure to the reservoir that sprays the finish. We then take the high volume, low pressure spray gun. Underneath the countertop you'll find a multiple outlet strip. Turn that to the on position. You'll hear a turbine running kind of like a vacuum sound, and air will be shooting out the front of the gun. To get the finish to come out of the gun, you just squeeze the trigger and a little mist or vapor will come out the front of the gun, and that is our polyurethane finish that we're going to apply to our sign. We always want to start spraying off of the project, off to the side. Once the spray has been started, then we can move it back and forth across the top of the material. You want to apply a nice, light, thin, kind of a white finish. You want to spray the edges of the board as well, and the ends. Remember, the finish will dry clear, so the white, milky surface that you have now will disappear. Go around the entire board. When you're done, hang the spray gun back on the nail, turn off the air pressure, and then find that multiple outlet strip underneath the counter and turn it into the off position. The turbine should turn off. We need to let the sign dry now for a day, so find a couple of blocks, set the sign on the blocks, come back in a day. Please wash your hands after you've been using the finish. Okay, soap and water, very good. Now we need to clean up our stencils. Go back to your workstation, place all of the stencils back in the tote, along with the directions, put it back in the cupboard, and you're all set.